how do you stand out in an era where there is a lot of noise? As a presenter, we want people looking at you. We want you, assuming you've done your preparation and you've practiced and all that, and at the same time, we want to elevate your executive presence as a leader if you're low on the rankings, to raise yourself. If you're already high on the rankings, to solidify that executive presence in the eyes of your colleagues or clients or whoever it might be. You do that by giving great presentations.
Before they present to the boardroom, what is an immediate thing that they can do to try and calm their nerves? Welcome back to another episode of Wise and Shine. I'm your host, Dawn, budget babe and author of Take Back Control of Your Money. And I'm joined here with Alex.
Hi, this is Alex. You can find me on socials, your Nest to Next coach, where I support people through transitions in life, whether it's spiritually, emotionally, or financially.
And today, actually, this feels a little bit like deja vu because I was just with our guest not too long ago on the opposite end of the interviewing. And now the tables have turned. So for those of you who don't know, you might find his voice familiar, more so than his face. But we'll let our guest introduce himself.
Thank you, Dawn, Alex. It's great to be with you and all of your wonderful viewers and listeners. I'm Glenn Van Zutphen, the founder and CEO of Van Media Group. We do executive training and coaching, mostly in the media training, communication skills, podcast, public speaking, TED Talk realm. And then every Saturday morning from 9 to 12, I host the Saturday morning show on MoneyFM 89.3, along with my wonderful co-host, Neil Humphreys.
Thank you, Glenn. So we are having Glenn on today for an episode where we'll help you unpack why, despite your competencies and your successes and achievements in the workplace, why are you being ignored? And how can you step up? So our producer thought, who better than to teach us about all of this than someone whose visibility is literally his living? And that's why we have Glenn on the show.
It's a huge topic, and your listeners and viewers are right to perhaps be a little bit confused about it or not understand all the nuance of it. A lot of people have had coaching, executive coaching training, presentation skills training, media training, and yet they still don't quite nail it, what it is they're trying to achieve. Let's frame this conversation in terms of the intersection of impactful communication and executive presence. When you think about somebody who is really memorable from in a business environment, it's typically somebody who's a great communicator, as well as having that element of presence around them. They walk into a room, they command a room. Now, of course, if you're a billionaire, you do that kind of automatically. Everyone's looking at you like, oh, what can they teach me? What can I learn from them? But for most of us, that's not sadly the case. Although I'm waiting to hear what happens with Toto tonight on the $10 million draw, because I do have a ticket for it. So I'm hoping that at least I'll be a 10 millionaire 24 hours from now. Anyway, I digress. So this intersection is really important. And it's one thing over the past 6 to 9 months that I've actually had a huge increase in interest in from my clients. They want programs, they want coaching that marries these two things, because they are finding that a lot of their executives are super smart and know their business and everything, but they're just not turning on the switch.
I have to agree. You know, I just came back from Dubai a couple of weeks ago from the 1 billion followers summit. And everyone there was so many famous content creators there. Everyone knows Mr. Beast, right? So
everybody's somebody, right?
Yeah, and I don't even get to gauge whether he commands presence when he walks into the room, because his face is so recognizable. Everyone just floods there, so you don't get to see any quiet charisma. But I thought it was very interesting because I was hanging out and I got to see so many people. There were some folks where I had no idea who they were. But the moment they walked in, even though no one flocked to them, I instinctively knew this person was somebody. I don't know who you are, but you're definitely somebody. You have something, but I can't quite pinpoint what it is. So why do you think that happens?
We're in the age of influencers and influence. What you're referring to, Dawn, reminds me that there are still a lot of people that are out there for the flash, that are out there for just the numbers on their Insta account, and they're not truly digging.
Or their LinkedIn.
Or their LinkedIn, or YouTube, or whatever their platform is. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's your game, that's important to you. But you got to have some substance behind it, and you have to be able to communicate with people in a way that is authentic and that also meets the need of the audience that they're speaking to. And we're going to talk a lot about audience during this today, because I absolutely believe that is the single most important thing that executives can either do or miss in their communication.
And in fact, like that could be a much better way of communication, a more impactful way, because in this, we used to come from an era where information was not as easily accessible. So when you have a lot of information, you become respected, the authority, right? And you then command that presence and respect because you have something that everyone else does not have to offer. But in today's world, that's kind of the reverse. With AI and the internet, anyone can be a knowledge leader instantly, anytime.
Earlier, you mentioned the two groups of people that you met, right? People that you immediately thought that this fella is an influencer or
It's a somebody.
is a somebody, and there are others whom you felt like, yeah, they're missing that X factor. So, is it an X factor thing, or is it a non-verbal communication kind of a trait or a skill that anybody, a speaker, can upskill in or be better at even before they speak?
Everyone can learn it. Some people say, "Oh, good communicators, are born, not made, or whatever." Absolutely, anyone can be a great communicator. Now, the one very important thing we say at the beginning of all of our training sessions, in one way or another, is we are not here to create a Franken communicator, right? Some kind of Frankenstein, put this piece together with that piece, with that piece. We want people to be their own authentic self, but we can definitely show them certain skills, tips, hacks that they can use to become better. And so if you are a very quiet communicator, you are often every bit as effective, if not more so, than somebody who is loud. I grew up in Chicago. In America, we tend to be a little bit louder, or certainly can be. Many people in Asia are not comfortable. That's not their style. They prefer to be a quieter communicator, and that's fine. They can absolutely achieve that. I will say, if I can just add one more thing, the style of communication has changed a lot, which may sound pretty obvious, but if you take even the last 10 to 15 years, if you take the last 5 years, when we look at the Insta or TikTok world in which we are in, if you are trying to communicate with anybody who is under 30 or anyone who's even under probably 40, you better be very clear about how you're going to get your messages out really fast and really impactfully. If you are communicating with people over 40, you can be a little bit longer, slower, more deliberate about your messages. But that's just one very obvious example of communication today has changed and is continuing to evolve rapidly. And executives, another challenge that they have was not adapting to the communication world we're in and not understanding that, hey, if my product is or service is geared toward a certain generation, I better be communicating the way that generation wants to be communicated to. One last challenge is all of the executives we work with, bar none, their biggest challenge is they know too much. And you can imagine when people know too much, what happens? They say too much. And when they say too much, yes, I'm talking to you out there. When you say too much, you run the risk of doing several things. One, boring people, confusing people, getting off track, the track you were hoping to be on in the first place. And in the case of media interviews, opening up other topics to the media that they'll want to explore versus the topic that they're hoping to discuss. So that is a huge challenge, how to get people to understand. And we give them frameworks on how to stay in their lane once they're in their lane, how to stay there and be communicating in that.
And I think one observation that we're seeing and hearing from the ground is that there are many executives, many professionals who sound polished, but they're just ineffective. So from your experience, what does that actually sound like?
Usually because they're not truly digging into the audience and what the audience needs. How do you stand out in an era where there is a lot of noise? So have both of you been to Tokyo, been to Japan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, been to Shibuya Crossing, right? I use this analogy all the time in my training. When you go to Shibuya Crossing, those of you that have been there, you'll know immediately what I'm saying. Those of you that haven't, imagine a huge area where there is just building wall after wall after building, amazing signs, neon signs everywhere. The signs that typically stand out to people are the simple ones. Let's say there's a Monster drink logo or H&M or Shibuya 109, the department store or whatever, right? So when you stand at that intersection, especially at night when the neon's on and it's dark around, certain signs stand out to you because they're simple, they connect with you in some way, and they don't overburden you to think about it. This is the kind of communication environment that we're in. We're in a Shibuya every day. Our social feeds are screaming at us. We're pumping out information and things to other people as well, content of all kinds. So how do we get an executive to understand how can they be that simplified Shibuya sign, that simplified message, the one that sticks, the one that is appropriate to the audience that it's trying to speak to. And that's the way you combine polish with impact. If you are a speaker, the only thing that should matter to you is your audience. What does every audience in the world, everywhere care about the most? Itself, right? Every audience, whether you're a trainer, a keynote speaker, a minister, a whomever, every audience is there to get something. It's a contract, right? You provide the thing, they are there to get the thing, whatever that thing is. And so every little thing we can do as presenters, as trainers, as keynote speakers, everything we can do to make that happen for our audience is exactly what we should do.
Now, Glenn, you've interviewed thousands of people, not just me, on your show. What is the fastest way that you personally can tell which guest actually has authority?
So can we switch out authority with impact? I think sometimes what I look for is impact. Who is able to come on, for example, my radio show every Saturday morning from 9 to 12 on MoneyFM 89.3. Does that sound too obvious as a commercial? Anyway.
It's okay, you can plug it.
But when they sit down, I need information for my audience fast. And I can very quickly tell who's had some sort of training, who's had some sort of preparation to get that story, that message, that whatever out.
But how do you tell that before they start speaking?
Often I can't tell it before, but usually in the first few sentences. But in terms of who's really good or who's ready to go, that usually takes a sentence or two. Oftentimes, the bad part of that looks like they just jump into with all kinds of facts, figures, stats, information, and it's not framed in any way, all right? Let me give you and your audience a quick hack. Remember when we were in school, and if we wrote a term paper, it was a pyramid construction. You start at the top with a thesis, and then you build to the bottom, which is, the bottom of the pyramid, which is the result, the conclusion that you're coming with. Well, in journalism, in broadcasting, we do the inverse pyramid. So the long part of the pyramid is at the top. So that's the headline, the main point, the lead paragraph, whatever you want to call it, especially in journalistic terms. We say the main thing first. Today, I'm here to talk to you about finance. I'm going to give you 5 tips on how you can better plan for your retirement right here in Singapore. Good. I know where you're going to take us now with that. And then you're going to give us the 5 points, and you're going to go down the list all the way to the least important information at the bottom. So it's inverse pyramid, and it helps the audience, whether your audience is reading or listening or watching, it helps them understand kind of a verbal roadmap of where you're going to take them on that trip. Oftentimes, people do it the other way around on our interviews. They're starting with a small point, and they're going to build to this big point at the end of a 20-minute interview. Are you kidding me? Everyone's tuned out by then, right?
Switch stations.
Exactly. That's one way I can tell somebody who's been well-trained. They frame every answer, right? They frame an answer, and then they give the answer.
That's actually the same thing that would happen in a boardroom, right? Or in an executive setting.
Totally.
You go into a meeting and everyone's like, this meeting could have been an email. Because when you started speaking, you never gave context of what they should be listening for or what you're going to talk about. You just went into it. It was not framed, like you said. But if you went into the meeting and you had a framework, you specified that first, and then you went into your content, people would be listening during the meeting instead of tuning out.
It's not the same as a table of contents, a verbal table of contents, right? It's presenting the topic in a way that is useful and important to that audience. So in the boardroom, today we're going to talk about the 10 things we need to do in the first half of this year. I know all of us are concerned about several really important things, the geopolitical risk in our world today, tariffs, and whatever. I'm going to address those in my 10-point plan to help make sure our organization will not only survive, but thrive in this new highly risked and leveraged environment. Okay, everybody in the audience gets it. They know where you're going to go now. And then you can go with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is you want to do. For some of your listeners, I know you wanted to know a little bit about, hey, how can somebody who feels like they're not really connecting, they don't have that presence when they walk in a room, this is a way they can start to build presence. Every time they have a meeting, whether it's a one-on-one or whether it's a one-on-many, they are approaching their meetings and their discussions in a way like this that's very clear and concise and shows that they have a handle on the topic of the day.
Especially when things are happening live, which we can apply to the boardroom. It's really that, would you say 5 seconds that makes or breaks the...
7 seconds.
Oh, it's 7 seconds.
You got 7 seconds to make an impression.
Is there a hack that you can reverse what the listeners have already missed and catch their attention again?
I think the biggest and best thing you can do is be ready. So the minute you walk in that door, the minute the presentation starts, you have thought in advance about what you're going to say. You have thought in advance about your audience, what they need, what they want, and you've practiced it enough that when your mouth opens, you say something that's useful.
Can I share a hack? And I'd love to hear from your perspective if you think that's a valid hack. Because I've had my times when I was on stage, and finance being finance, some people get really bored and some others are super engaged. But I'll watch the room, and if I see that the vast majority are starting to yawn or playing on their phone and don't seem to be listening, I try to engage them by using this method, which is I ask questions. And I'll ask a question that will engage them. So one of my favorite questions to ask on stage is, raise your hand, or how many of you here agree with raise your hand. And then like the engaged ones will, right? And then the rest wouldn't. I say like, how many of you disagree? Put down your hand. And I'll say it louder. And then like the people who did not raise their hand, they would hear the put down and they were like, wait, what did I miss? And then that gets their attention back then. And then I would give one more question for those who missed it but just woke up, for them to engage. And then I continue my presentation again. Is that a hack?
Absolutely. If it works for you, it's a hack, and it's a good hack. Audience engagement can be really tough. We know, especially in Asia, Asian audiences don't want to raise their hand. Asian audiences don't want to speak up. And there's a lot of cliches in that, but it is actually very true. If you go to other parts of the world, if you go to North America, if you go to Europe, other places, people tend to be much more ready to engage in a group setting like that. So how do we do that? How do we engage? A lot of people, especially like MCs or trainers, coaches, speakers, think that automatically, if they ask a question, they're going to get a response. And they usually don't unless it's really compelling. So like what you did was great. Raise your hand, lower your hand, don't raise your hand. What I like to do, and depending on if I'm doing that kind of a format, especially if it's after lunch in the afternoon and you see people, maybe you're the third speaker in the afternoon, just before the coffee break, but after lunch, like that's the dead hour, right? That is, people are tired, they're groggy, they're digesting their food. So let's say there's been 2 or 3 speakers in a row right before me. I have them stand up. I say, hey, okay, I'd like to have all of you stand up. And then I do a standing poll, right? How many of you, agree with this? If you agree, sit down, right? That kind of thing. Now, that's a simple thing to do, but it breaks the psychological barrier of 2 speakers before and people getting dozy and sleepy. To your point, Dawn, if you look out not you, but if we as speakers or coaches, if we look out at an audience and people are on their phones, we have failed. That's on us as the speaker. Whether it's a room of 5 people or whether it's a room of, 500, we have failed to keep their attention or to say something that was useful and interesting to them. All right, that's okay. So we get it. We failed. All right, now we have to course correct. So you got to figure out something to do quickly if it's a presentation that's continuing, in how to engage them and get them back.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying Wise and Shine so far. I'm your host Reggie, aka your Chief Financial Coconut, and for us to continue to do this show so that you become a tad bit wiser every week, you gotta like, share, subscribe, help us beat the algorithm, but even more importantly, if you can, comment in the comment section below. Let us know your thoughts and also some questions that you would love us to answer. Yep, now back to the show.
What about for in the corporate setting? Let's say in a situation where it's a middle manager or a senior executive, and they are the third speaker in a long drawn-out meeting. They can't do things like stand up, sit down, raise your hand, put down your hands, because they might also come from a position where they don't really command that power yet. So it might be a bit awkward. Less awkward if the CEO or the boss says it, but it's a little awkward if it's like a middle manager or a senior executive who's doing that. What are some things that they can do in that boardroom setting or in the corporate meeting to get back the audience attention?
Hopefully, they've prepared well. That's the first and foremost. I know that sounds super obvious, but what does preparation look like for people that typically, let's say they've got a PowerPoint presentation, a 10, 15-minute PowerPoint presentation that they've got to deliver to the bosses or the board or whomever, the leadership. Typically, they put together the PowerPoint presentation. Almost always it's way too busy, right? Too much text, too many graphs, too many notes on the bottom. It's death by PowerPoint, right? The traditional bad slides everywhere. So that's usually the first thing they do. Second thing is they've just finished it that morning or late the night before, and they've read through the presentation twice, let's say, maybe 3 times, but they haven't once delivered verbally the presentation, out loud before they got into the room. So where are we now? We've got somebody who's junior to the group that's in the room. They're presenting something probably, important, otherwise they wouldn't be presenting it. And they're radically, woefully unprepared for that moment. So what are they doing? They're there, they've got the slides are busy. What happens when you put a busy slide up on a screen? What does the audience do? They read it. If the audience is reading a slide, what are they not doing?
Listening.
Listening, of course. So already you've lost the audience. All you've even done is put the first slide or the second slide on. They're gone because you have not commanded the room. Secondly, at that point, you've gone through the slide, a few times. So you know the deck enough to know these elements are coming up, but maybe you don't know the deck well enough to really present the deck and to make it yours because you just haven't practiced enough. And we're going to talk about practice in a minute. So all of a sudden, you've lost them. You're relying on looking at the slides, or if you're in presenter view, looking at the next slide that's coming up to remember what's next. You're maybe even trying to take a glimpse of your notes that are on the PowerPoint slide on the presenter view. So it's a waterfall of lousy decisions happening in real time. How are you going to get the audience back?
I want to interject before we hear from you the answer that this reminds me of the most common request from a lot of audiences: send me the slides. And in my earlier years, that's what I would give them. But as I grew and matured as a trainer, as a speaker, I would now tell them, there's nothing in the slides for you. Because my slide is like a question mark. What does that tell you? It's in the delivery, because anyone today can get content. But the purpose of our speech is not about content that you can Google, not about knowledge that you can ask ChatGPT for, but an actual takeaway or a push to make you take action. And no slide is going to do that, so you better listen. And I realized when I tell them that too, that you're not going to get the slides, they pay a bit more attention. And then create slides that, don't let them read because you'll just lose them. So I went from, in my early days, my slides were very wordy, very busy, to almost nothing. I love that. That's such a great hack. And I think executives can also apply this to their presentation. Just put the exact number, the KPI, a logo, and don't say what that logo is. So they have to listen to you explain it. But say that they have done everything well, they're prepared, and they have done the slides to be less busy, but they still lost the audience attention in that executive boardroom. So how? What's the solution?
I agree. I love everything you've just said, and I agree with it 100%. The challenge is that many companies require a full deck. If you're a management consultant, if you're an engineering firm, if you're an F&B, a hotel, a bank, an insurance company, you need to have a full deck. So it's inevitable. You have to have this because you've got a lot of really serious people sitting around a table from the C-suite, right? CFO, COO, CEO. So they can't just only walk away with a question mark. So here's what we've been doing for 3 or 4, 5 years now. We've been pushing a 2-deck strategy, which is get the full deck out there, the full, horrible, boring, word and text heavy and graph heavy and all of that. Do that to your heart's content, and then do save as presentation. And then the second deck, strip all of it out. Put in your question marks, put in your bold numbers, have good visuals. Most companies have a library of photographs, and their comms people, their marketing people have photographs all over the place of the company or videos of what they do, how they do it, products, etc. Just reach out to them and grab some great visual content and use that to tell your story. Then at the beginning of your presentation, you're going to make a very simple statement. You're going to say, today, I'm here to talk about XYZ. I'm going to take you through this. It's a great presentation. I have a full deck for you with all of the background information, all of the information you need to make your decision today. I will be sending that to you right after our presentation. But for now, for the next 10 minutes, let me personally take you on the journey of what we're talking about here. And that's where you do your stripped down deck. And so the audience understands they're going to get everything later, but then it's up to you as the presenter to make sure you really take them through that journey and sell them on it. Make sure your slides are relevant and are good for them. That we find is a really winning strategy, and it doesn't run afoul of corporate policy, because a lot of these companies have very strict policies about the kind of deck they want and the way they want it to look. It's very hard to get away from that. So that we find is a really winning strategy. Now, okay, let me pause right there. Sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes you have to have these busy decks. If you have certain slides that are super busy and you cannot no matter how bad you want to take them out of your presentation, do yourself a favor. Right before you put that slide on, say, ladies and gentlemen, the next slide I'm going to show you is a very busy slide. It has got a lot of rich information on that is absolutely important to our discussion here today. I'm going to put the slide on for you, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds or so to read through it and really take it in and understand the content that's on the slide. And then we're going to talk about it afterward. So, boom, hit the next slide. It's crazy. Let them, and then you're silent as the presenter, silent for 30 seconds or however long it takes you to read it. And then just give them a moment to take in the slide. Don't compete.
Is it good practice to have it printed out to give it to them as well?
No. Same. Then they just read it.
Attention would be on the paper in front
Then they're
of
looking
them.
at the desk, yeah. As a presenter, we want people looking at you. We want you, assuming you've done your preparation and you've practiced and all that, we want your authentic style to sell this program, whatever it is, product, etc. And at the same time, we want to elevate your executive presence as a leader if you're low on the rankings, to raise yourself. If you're already high on the rankings, to solidify that executive presence in the eyes of your colleagues or clients or whoever it might be. You do that by giving great presentations.
I love the 2-deck strategy. Such a great tip. So I hope those of you listening, you would find it useful too, especially if you were listening to Glenn talk about simple versus busy slides and you were just rejecting it in your head. He literally gave you the solution for it if your organization doesn't allow you to do that.
Can I say one word about practice? This is something that ties into these presentations. People often say, well, almost always they say to me, I don't want to practice too much because then it seems practiced. It seems rehearsed. It sounds rehearsed. All right. I am going to push back on that about as strongly as I can. Think about, you've seen TED Talks, the good ones, like the big, not the TEDx ones, the baby ones, the real ones, the big ones. How many times would you imagine those TED Talk presenters practice their full speech out loud before they stand up in the red circle and before it's recorded? Throw me a number.
A dozen at least.
How many?
12?
20, 30 times?
20, 30 times. Keep going. It is not uncommon for people to practice 75 or 100 times. A 10 or a 15-minute TED Talk full from start to finish verbally. So what happens between the 5 times that you practice something and the 75 times that you practice something? Does that speech become more innate to you, or does it become less innate to you? Obviously, the answer is it becomes yours. It becomes part of you. You know, I have been talking about this topic for 18 years, right? I've been training for 18 years. I've been a journalist for 35 years. I know this stuff back and forth. Not to say it's not evolving over the years, it is. I can sit here with you and talk all day long. And if you listen to my radio show, you can hear me talk for 3 hours long because I know it inside out, because I've spoken it so many times.
And that's how it becomes authentic.
Authentic, because when you own the material,
It becomes you.
exactly. Thank you, Alex. It becomes you. You are no longer relying. Now, you might need a note, a bullet point to say, oh, yeah, now I'm going to talk about this, or now I'm going to talk about that. But once you're on that topic, you know it, right? I mean, both of you in your own expertise, fields of expertise, you know your stuff. Somebody can get up and say, give me 3 points on this, and you will be able to do it. For that person or those people that practice their PowerPoint 3 times, it's not enough. It's not enough because once they start presenting it for the 4th time, they're still in their own head about it. They aren't comfortable. If anything goes wrong in the room, they're done because they can't course correct or adjust. Now, I'm not saying you have to practice your PowerPoint 75 times or 100 times, but certainly more than 5. Is that 10? I don't know. It's different for different people. And then you made the point earlier, Don. Once you do that, once you own that information, then your authentic presentation self comes out and you are able to look at the audience and focus on the audience as you are delivering. And if you see those moments where you see them start to wander or eyes glaze over, boom, you're jumping right in with an anecdote, a story, an exercise, a question, a activity, whatever it is, right? And as a presenter, that's where you want to be. You want to grab them.
This resonates with me, right? Because when I am presenting a sales deck, I get better as I go along, right?
Of course.
When it comes to the 100th time, the 200th time, I can do it with my eyes closed, but that's where I'm watching the audience and trying to understand what else should I be saying or what else should I not be saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
And interesting when you say that, so some people get to that point, but they make the fatal mistake of not keeping it fresh. They make the mistake of memorizing it, and it's so innate to them that the presentation gets boring, right? So you've got to keep the energy. You've got to keep, focus on the audience, what the audience needs out of a given presentation. You have to keep energy up. You have to keep energizing them with activities, questions, whatever that might be. That's the other part of that. You have to know it well, but then you also have to keep it fresh.
I love that. And I think going back to executive boardroom, the other part that you briefly mentioned earlier on is that when you prepare this much and it becomes this innate, it also then leads to a situation where if you get thrown a question, you can focus your energy on answering that question instead of freaking out, because it's unexpected. And it's for those who are underprepared that when they get those questions, they demonstrate that anxiety that, oh, you just caught me off guard, and they can't recover in time because they are not well prepared. All they have in their mind is presentation.
Yeah.
And they fail to react in the now, and that's why their communication fails.
Another big question everyone says, I'm so nervous when I speak. What can I do to not be nervous?
That's a good one. What would you say?
Simple. Everything we've just been talking about. Prepare properly. Practice more than you ever think you need to. And anticipate questions from the audience if there are going to be questions. The minute you own that presentation, whatever it is, whether it's a 5-minute speech on your summer vacation or whether it's a 45-minute, about the new product, the new service, the minute you own that one element of nervousness, of fear vanishes.
Okay, but that is if they're preparing for the next. What if they just showed up? They thought it was enough, and then now they're feeling nervous before they present to the boardroom. What is an immediate thing that they can do to try and calm their nerves so they can communicate a bit more effectively?
So breathe. Breathe is always important. If it's a Q&A, breathe. If somebody asks you a question, take a 4-second pause, which is an inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Just a gentle one, not like you're gasping for air, right, and drowning. But take an inhale, exhale. Release some of that stress. That is a good way. Another way is before you even get in that room, connect with people. Let's say you're at a conference and there's a coffee break right before your talk or your Q&A or whatever. Get out and meet people. Work the room a little bit, not just with one person in the corner, but try to touch base with a number of people, because then when you're up on stage, all of a sudden you're looking out, you're not seeing all strangers. You're seeing a few people that are recognizable to you. Maybe you had a pleasant chat with them.
I like to do that, yeah.
It makes it comfortable. And if you get nervous, look at those people.
I love that trick.
It's a simple thing, but it really does, if you're at that stage where you're just really freaked out, every little bit helps.
So beautifully simple, but yet incredibly effective.
I have one last question though. We talk about impact. We never discussed voice control. How important is that in terms of commanding the audience? Like how loudly to project, how to project, and even intonation. Does that matter?
Yeah, it does. It's a really kind of involved and deep conversation that's very personal to everybody that you speak to. So I'm hesitant to say one size fits all, because it definitely does not. The one thing I will say is if any of our friends who are listening or watching are ever handed a microphone in a situation, use it. Don't be afraid of a microphone. A microphone helps you command the space, even if it's a relatively small space. How many times does somebody offer a microphone just being like, no, I don't need it? Wrong. Even if you're a great speaker, even if you're used to speaking, I get offered mics all the time. I will always use the mic. Why? Because even in a small space, if I'm using the microphone, they cannot help but listen to me. If I'm just talking without a microphone, it's easy for ambient noise, the room noise, whatever noise to filter in. They can kind of tune out. But with that microphone, and especially if you're using it the right way, up close to your mouth, it doesn't do any good to hold it down like when you're singing karaoke, right? You got to hold it close to your mouth so that you can hear yourself in the speakers. And hopefully you can do a mic check before, you actually start your presentation. You have got to be able to use that microphone. And then if there are certain elements of your talk where you want to make more impact, bring the mic a little bit closer so it's a little bit louder, and then you can take it away just slightly for the rest of the time. You can kind of use the mic that way if you have a chance to practice with it. Microphone's a wonderful tool. Overall, if anyone ever hands you a mic, use it.
I love that. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So we have unpacked a lot of things on how to be a more effective communicator today. Thank you, Glenn, for lending us your time, your expertise, and all of these little tips really help, because who better to learn from than someone who's living on radio every Saturday? Is literally about commanding that communication effectiveness so that you guys don't switch the radio stations.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure to be with you. I hope everybody got some good tips and tricks out there.
I'm sure they have. And Glenn, if they want to listen to you more, where should they tune into?
That's right. Thank you very much for, I think, our third commercial today, maybe our fourth. Money FM 89.3 here in Singapore every Saturday from 9 to 12. Lunchtime, and of course we're streamed online as well. If you don't have an old school radio, which a lot of people don't, you can get us online. Just Google it and you can figure out where to stream us.
This is not a paid ad. But it's
I appreciate it.
Always good to watch in action communication, so you can link what we have shared in this episode with how it looks like in practice, and then hopefully gives you some ideas on how you can do it on your own.
And if people want to get in touch with you directly, where can they find you?
I'd love to have people connect with me on LinkedIn. Glenn Van Zutphen, my name is there. So also the same name on Instagram. Basically I have a YouTube channel as well where I often have tips on communication. So I'm around. People can find me.
Thank you for tuning in today on Wise and Shine. Send this episode to anyone you think who needs to learn how to be a better communicator, or who has confided in you about all these gripes and complaints that we highlighted at the beginning of the episode. Hopefully this helps them in their career, in their path. And if you're not already subscribed,
Yes, please go on to www.thefinancialcoconut.com and leave your email address there so that when we launch new episodes, you will be informed.
thank you for tuning in today into Wise and Shine. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye.